100th episode of Kyle and Cody's called CinemaCast. Not counting live shows, spin-offs, interviews, lost episodes.
How many lost episodes have we had?
Yeah. 3?
3?
Because I've maybe killed 2. And then you lost 1. I can't remember what my second one is, though.
Yeah, fair enough.
I feel like there's another one. Anyway, not sure how many visitors we've all gotten in the long run, but yeah, it's been fun. But yeah, I'm not sure where to.
I realized this was Canadian, and didn't realize any of the actors in it. But I mean, it's from the 1960s, so like all the actors in it would have been probably fairly old at this point in time.
From what I've read, this is an all-Canadian cast in this one, is my understanding, which is well over the threshold for like Canadian film like credits. But yeah. So we're doing the thing we've chosen to do with our for the 100th episode is something we've been thinking about doing for a while. I think we just never ended up getting around to it. But we're reviewing the 1961 film The Mask, which is oft remembered as which is considered Canada's first feature-length horror film. I don't know if I had communicated that to you before, but
I guess we don't have really decent timeline in terms of what we classify as Canadian horror, considering this came out in 61. I guess their first slasher flick would have been
My Bloody Valentine. I suppose Black Christmas. But yeah. Yeah.
Black Christmas, yeah. Because we did both of those movies on the podcast earlier. So they're out there if you're looking for other.
But yeah, I actually got a reasonable timeline, I think. Because I read a book a little while ago. They Came From Within, A History of Canadian Horror Cinema by Calum Vatnsdal? Vatnsdal. Which lays out a pretty firm timeline of all the things that were sort of getting close to becoming Canada's first horror film. The first horror film is actually a 20-minute long short film, what we can now consider a short film, called just The Werewolf, I think it is. And it's just like a 1918 silent film that's like 18 minutes long. Sadly lost to history. I think the experts seem to think it died in a fire. But yeah, and then there were a couple false starts. They bring up the book brings up some movies like, I think, The Devil Bear, which is just not a horror movie. It's just got like a sort of a monster movie thing, but it's a comedy. It's about a gorilla, which I guess is what they consider a devil bear of. A devil bear? It's the 40s. I don't think it's or the 30s. I don't think it's too much anything. A couple other ones on that he lays out in the book are the Chinatown Killers. It's Chinatown something, which is sort of close, but it's not. It's more of like a exploitation film more than anything, and it's just not. It's also just like a deeply racist film from like the way back whens.
Yeah. You'd mentioned earlier that there was a requirement for it to be claimed as mostly Canadian. However, out of the two known actors, 2 of them are Canadian. One of them, like the main female lead, is American. So, like, what is the requirement for a film to be claimed as?
I think it's
because I'm looking.
The majority of the money goes to Canadian people. Is it? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I was looking up. Apparently, they have a Canadian supernatural horror film list, and one of them mentioned that it was Canadian, but it was also like Irish Canadian, so I
Yeah,
don't know.
there's. But this is shot in Canada, mostly Canadian cast, Canadian director. Obviously, like the Americans distribute it, but it's yeah. So this yeah, the reason like behind that because there are horror films beforehand, but like Canada just doesn't really we don't get a lot of films period really because just in yeah
Apparently the 1990 ABC two-part psychological horror drama miniseries, like It miniseries, is also some for some reason in this
yeah
list.
depending on like locations you can sort of like you can swing it. This is doing pretty well for it.
Yeah, it was launched in BC, like it was shot in BC, so that kind of makes sense.
So yeah, the reason sort of behind that is just that like in the 19 like really early on like our film like when you go really far back, like really far back to like the early days, film studios and theater chains were a lot more intertwined. That's a situation the American government ends up actually like kiboshing at some point, because it's monopolistic, having like theater chains and production studios being aligned like that. But before that really takes place, American theater chains buy out a lot of the Canadian theater chains, so they just flood the Canadian market with American films, which really kind of just fights off development of a Canadian film industry, just because there's so much English language entertainment getting flowed in from the States, with just like the odd film being produced elsewhere. And also, early days, you're a lot more likely to have films filmed on like I don't know, like a lot less location shooting maybe. Like painted backgrounds are a lot more acceptable, so you can film like a lot of stuff and more stuff in California than you normally would. What ends up being like Canada's big claim to fame is documentaries, which is something that like the National Film Board, which we have up here, it's a way of like them just government funding productions of movies. An easy thing to spin is just like, okay, we're gonna have the government pay to get documentaries filmed. The word documentary is actually created by a Canadian filmmaker, so that's how that is. Eventually, you come into the time after, like in the 70s or 80s, or I think in the 70s this starts where you can sort of get some tax incentives to make like regular movies, but that's not in the picture at the time the Mask gets produced, which is produced and directed by our good friend Roffman. What's the guy's last name? Our first name. Don't have it straight in front of me because of course not.
Julian Roffman.
So he's the producer in this. He's kind of getting he'll end up getting this shipped to or getting like American distribution rights. He does in a first attempt at getting a Canadian film popular is something called The Bloody Brood, which gets released a few years before this, which is a violent exploitation film, which doesn't end up going too well. But he ends up by the time he eventually recovers from that loss and goes on to make The Mask, and in doing that, he also gets a few ideas to make it like really enticing to just like the general American audience, because this ends up actually not only being Canada's first horror film. It's got like 4 different things that it's like the first Canadian film to do, and it's kind of wild how popular this kind of ends up being, because because of the distribution rights they get. This ends up being the first Canadian picture to make a lot of money in the States, like make a profit in the States, because it's distributed by Warner Brothers. But and yeah, it's also part of the reason. One of the reasons it was so popular is it was one of the first films to implement 3D, like red, green, red, cyan, 3D glasses stuff, and that draws in a lot of audience, and it draws it in with these like 3 sequences credited to a Serbian filmmaker who didn't actually end up doing it. So they end up making these big 3D sequences, and it attracts a lot of audiences. It comes with this little mask that you get that has the 3D goggles on it, and yeah, it's a pretty big deal. It makes like 5 times its budget in the box office. So
I was gonna ask you, did you actually watch it in 3D?
no, I didn't. I feel it holds up okay. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
So my version I get like a Blu-ray.
My I was gonna say, like, I ended up not finding a copy of it because it's from the 1960s, and apparently it's just on Daily Motions, like the site. And I feel like even if I did or was capable of watching it in 3D, I don't know if the cyan glasses would have exactly worked super well on my phone. So, not that I have like 3D cyan glasses just lying around or whatever,
but so I actually have regular 3D glasses lying around too. I just don't have a 3D TV. I think the first time we talked about doing this, I think I asked you, it's just like, do you know anyone with like a... Because the Blu-ray I have actually is like restored to do, and in a way that it does like the modern version of 3D, like with the black glasses, stereoscopic or whatever it's called. And I think the first time we talked about doing this, I asked you if you knew anyone with a 3D TV, and I think you did actually say that like your parents had one or something, but
I think they used to. They had one of those like it was such a cool niche thing when it first generally came out, but I don't think it really held up. I don't think we even watched a whole bunch of 3D movies on that TV. Like, it was just easier to not watch it in 3D. So
I do recall the 3D DVDs being the 3D Blu-rays being more expensive too. If I remember correctly. Yeah.
Probably.
They probably were the same price as like the 4K Blu-rays, which those are expensive. I just end up having to splurge on them occasionally for like the really fancy looking movies. Like I ended up watching Dune Part 2 in 4K, which is all right.
I don't really fully grasp the idea of 4K, so
pretty picture make brain go burr.
Yeah, but like, is that all that 4K is? I thought they had to add in like extra like features to 4K. Oh, you're saying 4K. Okay. Yeah, gotcha. I thought you were talking about 4D,
no,
where like you have to like get the special chairs. And then they like spray mist in your face to make things smell funny or whatever.
Yeah, no.
I don't see how that would be entertaining for me, but it's just...
I don't even like the... You know what? I went to... When I go to... I went to see Mad Max a little while... Like the new... No, sorry, the Furiosa a little while ago. Which I guess, Mad Max Saga, whatever. And I realized something while I went to see that, because I went to see it in the Cineplex Odeon with the recliner seats, and I realized I didn't really like those recliner seats. I kind of just would rather sit in a regular theater chair.
I kind of like the idea of being able to recline. I know they have like full-sized recliners at this point, but
I mean, you don't recline that far.
yeah, like having the ability to at least put my feet up, so I'm not like just sitting is kind of nice.
I don't know. I'm on my feet too much. My feet are always sore, and if I'm on like a very particular kind of chair, they don't. It ends up not being super comfortable for me in the long run. But yeah, maybe it's just that I didn't find those chairs comfortable. Whatever. But I just yeah, I prefer regular theater chairs to those. But Secrets of Chinatown was the name of that movie from earlier. I I had trouble finding it. Yeah, so we get The Mask in 1961 after that failure. It actually ends up making, because of the distribution deal, they end up making their money back before they actually release the film. Yeah, so it ends up being this big thing. It doesn't seem to like have resulted in like a big onset of Canadian horror afterwards. Part of that is just because Roffman isn't one to make a bunch more of these. Yeah, he wanted to make more serious films, which never really materialized. I'm pretty sure he doesn't end up making any more films after this. Actually, yeah, I don't know that he directs another film. He works on some more, but I don't think he directs another film after this. Yeah, no, it seems like it. Yeah, so I think it's still a little wild. This doesn't like start like a trend eventually, because yeah, I mean, good movies don't necessarily start trends. It's just about when like we don't really get a bunch of Canadian horror films until some filmmakers figure out and some laws change that they can get some like good tax write-offs and make some films appear for that. Yeah. But yeah, this is a film that's filmed in and around Toronto. The museum scenes actually take place at the one of the universities. I think University of Toronto, I think. But yeah, it ends up being a pretty big a reasonably big deal. I don't know that it ends up lasting, and it's a film that's very much of its time, but I think it's pretty an interesting watch, and it's got like a nice little legacy to it. I think. Elephant in the room, I suppose. This isn't the Jim Carrey Mask movie, obviously.
Which is kind of ironic because I was watching this on Daily Motion, and the next movie in the queue was actually Jim Carrey's The Mask. Although I do believe it was in Spanish, but
I think because of that, I think in later re-releases they actually renamed the movie a couple times. None of them quite make as much sense. I think in some of the '70s re-releases of this film, they call it "The Eyes of Hell," which doesn't have anything to do with anything, but it is a sweet ass name, if anything else. And then they also, I think, briefly renamed it to another thing. It's really stupid what they ended up calling it. Oh yeah, someone renames it briefly to, I think in the '90s or something, to the Spooky Movie Show. It's just really terrible. The movie features the titular mask, which is based off real life Aztec masks. It's a semi-famous artifact. It doesn't really look this well, and I think in real life it's sort of like in real life it'd be a lot more obvious because the actual prop ends up like sort of similar color scheme. Don't suppose that I might be able to find it, but yeah, it's based off that. And honestly, the backstory of the masks is a bit more of like a weaker point of the movie if you try to take it really seriously, because it's like they go back and forth of where this thing's supposed to be from. Some people say it's an Aztec mask, which I don't know that that's actually a really accurate thing. I don't know if that's said in the movie for sure. I hear South American I hear near the city of Tikal, which is in Guatemala, which is in Central America, not South America. Sorry, I'm on the Internet Archive for the name of that. Trying to find the name of that mask. I think it's just some really off the wall article. Yeah, the real life mask it's based off has like lot larger segmented scenes, like pieces. The mask in the movie is like implied to be like seems to be built over a human skull, and is made of like a little bit of several little chunks of like pottery pointed together and with like big circular eyes. It can look pretty silly, especially the giant size version of it they have in some of the hallucination sequences. Those ones especially looks very silly, but it is a kind of a neat mask because like the actual one the actors wear, it even has like a feature where like the jaw moves around. And honestly, it's a whole thing about like this is some whole thing. It's an evil mask that like draws people to villainy, and it's like based off of like they make the statement that it's like associated with human sacrifice, um which I guess makes sense in the thing, but yeah, I don't even know that like there were masks like this associated with like human sacrifice in Aztec society, even though this is in Guatemala, and I don't know that so much that the Aztecs really engage with that part of the country. Yeah, it's a good bit south of Mexico, where the Aztecs were based, which would probably make it just a Mayan mask. That's probably what you end up calling it. But Guatemala, for those wondering, is like just about like the third country up from from Panama. Sorry, fourth country up from Panama. It's like way on the tippity bottom of North America. So yeah, it's a very 60s silly backstory that doesn't really hold up to scrutiny, but I think it don't necessarily need to hold it up to one. But yeah, it is just sort of participating in like another one of these. Oh, we're gonna use like First Nations art, like First Nations lore to like be really skooky about it, and like not really like just use it as a prop instead of like engaging with real life stuff. It's could be a lot tackier than it is, and you just sort of kind of ignore it to a point. This film also has a pretty heavy subtext about being about addiction, and especially like because yeah, they bring up in several points that like this is sort of like a thing that's something that's causing the wearer to become addicted to using the evil powers of the mask, which yeah, obvious parallels to addiction. Perhaps even like them taking a shot at hallucinogenics specifically, which may be a little bit non-scientific, but I mean it's the 60s. This is that information's probably not out there, because I think that's like this is still like maybe even before psychedelics were even like outlawed, just barely. Into the plot. Yeah, those are just a few little things. We'll talk more about this as we get in. We're open to like a credit sequence where they just sort of like it's kind of unfortunate looking because it's in black and white, which they really didn't have a choice, but it does just kind of look like just like splooge hitting the screen and like it forming into the credits. It's kind of unfortunate, and they can't change the color at all because the movie's still in black and white. Was this movie like? It's hard for me to tell. Was this movie in red and cyan? Was this been red and cyan for you? Because obviously that's edited out in my version.
Very much so in black and white.
Yeah, maybe I don't know. Maybe I mean I think the Hays Code is still a thing. I don't know that that's a thing you can necessarily comment on. But yeah, no, it's a little bit unfortunate. So here's a question. Did you get in your cut of the movie I sent you? Did you get the bit with the guy at the beginning who says he's a mask expert?
I don't think so.
Yeah, no. So like, this was cut from a lot of the later versions of the film, but at the beginning of, especially the original version, because it's the 1960s and people don't know how to use 3D glasses yet, they put a guy into the movie who says he's an expert on like masks. This guy's played by this guy who ends up turning who like when you do research on the movie, it just turns out to be like he did a bunch of publicity stunts. He did a bunch of just random shit for nonsense reasons to promote things. Jim Moran. Oh yeah, no, I didn't realize that was actually his name in the movie and in this. Jim Moran's this guy who's famous for doing a bunch of publicity stunts. He's a publicist. What else did he do? I'm just gonna bring up some examples of the stuff he did because he's sort of an entertaining character. Yeah, he's. I think it says in the Wikipedia that like Time ranked him as the supreme master of that most singular marketing device, the publicity stunt. Notable stunts. On behalf of General Electric, who sold a refrigerator referred to as an Eskimo when you could still use that word. He was interviewed by Parks Johnson and Wally Butterworth of Vox Pop Radio, claiming that one must give in to the impulsive behavior because inhibitions were warping our personalities, as he threw eggs at an electric fan. I don't know what the deal is there. During the 1944 presidential campaign, yeah, he changed horses midstream, it says. I don't know if that's super impressive. Here's a better one. He walked, for a publicity stunt, he walked a bull through a New York china shop to promote a real estate development. And he also did a thing like look for a needle in a haystack. And he also sat on an ostrich egg for 19 days and actually managed to hatch an ostrich egg by like sitting on it like a bird. So he's just this funny character that they brought in to pretend to be a mask expert. And he does this like subtle hint that like, when you hear the words "put the mask on," you should put your 3D glasses on. So because he needs to explain that bit because they're from the 60s and don't know anything. I think there's literally been like one other full movie where they did this for 3D. But yeah, it's kind of an interesting scene. It's really it's kind of boring, honestly, but it's in like the tradition of like old sci-fi movies where they'd have a guy at the beginning explain the plot. Those mileages often very much vary. It's not something we've kept in a modern day. But yeah, and he does just sort of give away the plot that like, oh, this mask is cursed, and although I'm not superstitious, I would never put it on for any reason. But yeah, he introduces our main character, Alan Barnes, who's gonna have to deal with the mask stuff. We open the actual film to a lady's scream as she's like sort of like stumbling through the rain, being chased by this guy. Who, they don't really run. They're just sort of like walking after each other. And eventually, the lady who's being chased stumbles and gets strangled by, this character who gets scratched across his face by her and is all scratched up. It's kind of a neat little effect. This character we find out is Michael Raiden, played by Martin Lovett, or Lavu, maybe could be from Montreal. I don't know. Where does it say he's from? He's from Quebec, so it's probably Lavu. But yeah, I'll give the movie this. The actual actors in the movie I find are by and large pretty good.
Yeah, my only quarrel with that argument is that they're all white actors in black and white. So distinguishing in them is kind of hard for me.
Yeah, that is true. And they're all sort of like semi-formally dressed. They're all in, like, all the characters are in suits. Which, yeah, especially like you got like three 35 plus year old white men in suits who are like steadily, like, luckily I feel like the film does do okay in differentiating them, because like they're in very different settings, and only one of them's not even only in like 20 minutes of the movie. But we do also have a problem where our two female leads are just sort of like, it's hard to keep track. Like they got Miss Goodrich and Pam Albright, played by Ann Collins and Claudette Nevins, respectively. And you got to like be paying very close attention to which one's a blonde and one's a brunette, and you got to be paying very close attention to which one's which, because they both go into like the office and sort of like are being in the area of the main character, and because, which doesn't help that like one of them's like his secretary and the other's his girlfriend, which, I mean, it's the 60s and he has a secretary, which is basically I mean, in this era you might as well just in movies consider it a type of girlfriend, which, yeah, problematic, but it's not something you need. It's obviously could be a problem. But yeah, these two female actors of the same age, same complexion, just very easy to mix them up. And you got to be paying good attention. But yeah, I see your point there. But yeah, I think the acting's pretty good for the 60s, honestly. They seem to do pretty good jobs. But yeah, we next see this character Michael. He's waiting in the waiting room for an appointment with our main character, Dr. Allen. What's the guy's name? I have it written down. What am I doing? Barnes. So Barnes is Michael's psychologist or psychiatrist, whatever. I don't know. Our psychologist, I suppose psychiatrist is a doctor, like it is like doing work like on a patient, whereas a psychologist can just be doing research. So I suppose that's the difference. But Michael explains that like he's been having these nightmares again, where he goes around in the middle of the night and kills a woman. Notably, he's imagining that like, and he's getting a little concerned now because like, okay, I had a dream this lady scratched me, and I've actually got a scratch, and I don't own a pet, so I'm a little concerned I might actually be killing women in the middle of the night while I'm sleeping. But because this is 1961 and Alan Barnes is a terrible psychiatrist, he dismisses all this guy's concerns and just sort of sends him on his way. Because Michael is, I guess you could say he's talking crazy. He's making up this big story about this mask like manipulating him into killing women. But that's not an excuse to let him go. That seems like an excuse to like keep him under further observation. Yeah, no shit, he's having psychological like delusions. That's why he's here. That's why he's talking to you. Why don't you do something to help him? But yeah, Michael's really incredulous that he doesn't believe him. Which, yeah, again, terrible psychiatrist. I don't like. I gotta say, I think that like psychiatrists always get like a really bad rap in movies. Granted, psychiatrists not like universally the greatest, but I feel like sometimes the pop culture can be unfair to them. I think a lot of them are trying their best and aren't like like honestly sabotaging like the situation. It's like I think I first got this thought with like in like The Dark Knight Returns, when like psychiatrist was just sort of like being absolutely delusional and let like the Joker escape and like kill all those guys. Yeah, I just don't know that we got a bunch of like good psychiatrist rep. I suppose I didn't mind the one in like Split.
There was a a Brooklyn Nine-Nine episode that was always like, oh, if there's ever a case where it's potentially a psychiatrist, it's always the psychiatrist because psychiatrists are creepy.
Yeah. Can
So,
we make a movie about psychiatrists being the good guys? I feel like they're
I mean,
just trying to help.
for the most part, they are good guys, but damn.
Although I think a part of this comes down to, it's not necessarily, especially with like genre fiction, psychiatrist does good job and cures person is not necessarily conducive to science fiction, to like genre fiction plots.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that's part of it, but yeah, maybe we'll work on that as society. That might be a poly sci-fi episode, honestly, at one point. How pop culture portrays psychiatrists. But anyway, hope you guys are enjoying that little side project, because we're probably going to be doing a couple of those in a row next. Just FYI. We'll update you on that. But yeah, he's like, and Alan Barnes is just like terrible. He's just like, oh well, maybe the scratch in your face is self-inflicted, which, yeah, sure, bud, that sounds likely. But yeah, obviously this is gonna be a bit things. So Michael goes back home, and we see him having just wrapped, manufactured a package to go in the mail, and he starts yelling for his landlady, Miss Kelly, who actually ends up, I think, being he calls for Miss Keeley and makes her mail a package for him, which seems like he's being rude, but in reality he's doing this to get her out of the house so that she's not going to hear him commit suicide. As he sends her away, looks around his apartment, admires his cute little Chinese bobblehead, and then shoots himself. So yeah, and eventually, which I don't know how nice she's being, because Miss Keeley is the person who ends up having to discover the body, which isn't fun. So yeah, and she actually gives one of the few full bad acting moments in this movie, where she just, although part of this isn't her fault, it's the fault of the screen, like the director, because they film her turning around and then screaming directly into the camera, which is a really bad. I think this was a trend in the 60s. I think this was a trendy thing to do, and like 50s horror, which eventually we end up getting rid of. Mrs. Keeley, played by Eleanor Beecroft, who I understand lived to be like 90 something. So yeah, that's a thing. So she ended up calling the cops, and we're interacting with our top character. Google Cast List doesn't have him on it.
Yeah, once again, there's only 3 actors on here that are cast in the actual movie, according to Wikipedia. Paul Stevens, Claudette Nevins, and then Martin Levitt.
Wikipedia's... Oh, yeah, Wikipedia's worse, even. Although, weirdly enough, the Google bit the Google bit has more people, but, I mean, the Google bit doesn't include Bill Walker, who plays Lieutenant Martin, who's the character I'm looking for. So he's gets told to come investigate this mysterious death. And I don't think it's that mysterious. It's like the world's most obvious suicide.
Yes.
So, yeah. But he is not convinced, because even, our hero is just being a bum. Like, they're trying not to portray him as a bumbling cop, but at the end of the day, he keeps saying that this suicide is a murder. Like, he spends this entire movie being like, I don't know that this suicide's a murder. It's just like the entire thing. It's super weird. Kind of makes him look like an idiot, kind of. Because, yeah, he's just wrong. The audience has seen what happened, and yet he goes and continues investigating this whole thing, which does end up saving some people at the end of the movie, but it doesn't save the fact that he's an idiot and he's just like assuming there's a problem where there is none. The big other plot hole in this is that Miss Keeley apparently doesn't tell him about the package because, yeah. Which, yeah, would honestly be the more concerning thing, because a man committing suicide after sending something in the mail just spells mail bomb to me, right? It's just, yeah, that just seems like I mean, maybe it's the 60s. They don't have as many letter bombs. Maybe it's, I feel like there's more letter bombs in the 60s than anything. I don't know. Is there a golden age of letter bombs? I'm gonna type that into Google and see what comes up.
Ted Kaczynski, who was the Unabomber, was active from 1978 to 1996, so slightly 10 years after this.
Yeah, examples as far back as 1764. Wikipedia has a section called Use by Suffragettes. I don't know that's super common. It says lots of terrorist organizations were doing it. Yeah, no, I'm not finding too many examples from the 60s. At least not too many specific examples. Or I suppose I should be looking at the 50s. No, that's even less. There's only one example on Wikipedia from 1958. Yeah, and it's just like a Vietnam War thing. Where he just like fails, where like a guy tries to kill the president of Cambodia, the king of Cambodia. But yeah, anyway, moving on. Yeah, weirdly, that's not a thing that's being investigated, though I suppose it's not as common at the time. The next place the good detective lieutenant goes to look. Wait, I suppose this is a Canadian movie, so he's lieutenant. The next place the good lieutenant goes is to Michael's place of work at the Ancient History Museum, who ends up talking to Michael's old boss, who says that he had been bringing home some stuff to go investigate. And they figure, okay, why don't you come by his place and just make sure nothing's missing in case someone decided to rob him and shoot him and then fake a suicide. Which, granted, that could be a thing that's happened. It might be a thing you're checking, but it does, it just sort of this all does just make him look a bit silly. And of course, Michael's boss confirms that the mask, which is the titular mask, is missing. And he explains a little bit about it, and that there's some curse from it, and there's some rumors about it, like exacerbating the evil within somebody. They end up finding a note with Barnes' address on it, so they end up going to talk with him. And Barnes explains his whole deal that, like, oh, yeah, I'm a psychiatrist. He was doing something. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's really sorry to hear that happened. He looked like he was, I wish I could have done something. It's a shame his psychiatrist, couldn't have done something to possibly address this man's mental health. I guess it's just something beyond me as a trained psychiatrist. But, yeah. The funniest part of the scene, though, is the box that Michael mailed. It's sitting in the middle of Barnes's desk, and seemingly no one has read the where it came from sign. Barnes apparently doesn't read the postage on the box until after the lieutenant leaves, and then tries to call his secretary to get him to stop, but he's already gone. So he opens up the package. Great thing to do. Don't open packages sent to you by dead people. That's just probably a thing you don't do, especially if they died under certain circumstances. Obviously, this does not apply to wills and testaments. So yeah, so Barnes opens up this box and finds the mask inside, and is pretty spooked by it. So yeah, where he reads a little, and he gets a little note from Michael, who tells them his whole deal, and that he should put on the mask and try it if he's so certain it's not a big thing. Yeah, it's this time we get a big look at it. I've already described it a fair bit. It's pretty interesting. After he's done reading this, his girlfriend shows up, Pam Albrecht.
Yes, Pam Albright.
Yeah, Pam Albright. Albright, sorry. Pam Albright shows up and he's just like, "Oh, sorry, doctor. Have you seen a psychiatrist that could sweep me off who I could be madly in love with?" And yeah, so they're just like, "Oh yeah, sure." I'm sorry, he says to her. I'm just not really in a good mood. I just figured out one of my patients passed away and sent me this scary looking mask. And she's like, "Oh boy, that's sad to hear. I'll talk to you later." So he decides to. So he's looking at the mask, and at this point we have the letter read out to him and say, "Put the mask on now," signaling to the audience that they're supposed to put on their 3D glasses. And that's where we get the first of our dream sequences. Yeah, the dream sequences were originally written by Slavko Vorpacic, a Serbian filmmaker who proposed something that was way too expensive, so the director ended up changing things and making something a lot more manageable. Although Slavko's name still appears on the credits because he says he trusts the director to do a good job. The first dream sequence, hallucination sequence, is pretty cool. The masks breathe some fire. We see like a guy's throat gets slit. Some skeletons melt. Some snakes pop out of the skull's eyeballs or eye holes. So yeah, it's a pretty neat sequence. This is actually a thing that's somewhat confusing is the guy representing Michael in this scene isn't played by Michael's actor Paul Stevens. It's played by this mime, the mime Rudy Linschoten, who is filling in for Paul in the sequence, and he does a really good job. Honestly, it's really good body acting, which is why you hire a mime to do these things. Mimes, underappreciated actors.
Are mimes still a thing?
I mean, they do particular stuff. It's a thing you still
Okay.
learn because it's also like really good for like learning to do body acting. I think it might end up being really handy for working with CGI. But I think I mean, if you're a trained mime, you're just really good at that body acting. I know another main thing that was pretty important is like a mime actually trained the guy who played RoboCop to walk like that. So that's another use of a mime in films, if you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, after the scene, his secretary finds him on the floor, passed out. So Barnes just has this idea that like, oh, this is a thing we need to do to I need to use in order to unlock more secrets of psychiatry. Because, which I think, and this is just my theory, I haven't seen this written anything anywhere else, but this is just my thought, because this would have been popular at the time. I think this is maybe a shot at, Timothy Leary. And, because in the 60s, early 60s and 50s, a lot of guys were experimenting with LSD and stuff to explore different ways to explore psychiatry and do a bunch of really interesting mental health stuff. Some of it may be dubious, some of it's not. I've seen lots of different there's been a lot of articles saying oh, LSD can when properly administered can help you cure addiction and deal with mental health problems, which part of me believes that under the watchful eye of a very careful individuals.
Yes, from researches apparently psychedelics are supposed to be very therapeutic.
Ask your doctor before doing acid as a form of self-help.
Yes.
Is all I'll say.
Mind-altering drugs.
Acid and other mind-altering drugs. There is precedent that you can do some stuff with it. Some of that some of those statements is sort of can be sort of overstated. I've seen people be just like, oh yeah, like mushrooms and like MDMA is a magic thing that makes you a better person. That's not necessarily true. I mean, there's fascists that try hallucinogens and just get more fascist afterwards. So that's a thing. But I mean, this is 1961. We're just about to get a lot more drug war stuff going along. Some of it pushed along by like Nixon going the way he does. But yeah, this might be like a little bit of a light shot at. I mean, Timothy Leary, for those of you who don't know, he's the guy. I think he invented LSD. He's the first big LSD researcher though. But yeah, and it ends up being like a whole thing and like. But I mean, even if you don't take the hallucinogens angle, this is a really this still does function as like a really good allegory for addictions. Because Barnes kind of gets it. Like, you can, if you replace the mask with like alcohol or some other hard drugs, I think you still get like a very similar thing. Where like, okay, you say where Michael just like, okay, you say the drugs aren't helping me, but you haven't tried the drugs, so can you know how bad they are? And Barnes, after like the suicide, is just like, maybe I should try them. Maybe then I'll be able to understand him a little bit more. So he tries them and ends up falling into the same issues, which is going to be the plot of the rest of the movie. But yeah, it's kind of an interesting angle. I think it's I don't know how powerful I'd say it is, but it's it's interesting. Barnes tells I guess it's Pam, not the secretary. He tells Pam not to tell anybody, which she agrees to. Which she initially agrees to, but then she's just like, no. She ends up taking it away from him, and we get a really lame car chase where he just sort of follows her in the car. I suppose it's not really a car chase. You could just interpret this as like he followed her in a car. And Pam ends up returning the mask to the museum. And Barnes ends up going into the museum, sneaking around, and taking the mask back immediately. And then throughout the rest of the movie, no one's just gonna bring this up again. No one's gonna bring up the fact that he broke into a place and he's acting all strange now. Which, to be fair, if you're using this as a addiction metaphor, maybe that makes a lot more sense in that angle. That like they're trying to defend him from like a system that's not really going to be able to help him. Because they put him in jail. They're not going to be able to cure his addiction. Even today in modern prisons, which you'd think would be really focused on curing addictions because that's where a lot of crime comes from. But nope, they're not very good at it. They don't do much, especially. I know, they can. Yeah, they're not doing the best job of it these days. Despite us knowing the deal. After he gets back, he ends up putting the mask on again. We see some more faces. We see that our mime figure is like trapped in a ring of fire. They throw spiders like spider silhouettes at the camera, which kind of look decent, but honestly don't really look really good in the modern age. We see a personification of the mask who just sort of shoots fireballs out of his hands and looks absolutely sweet. Yeah, just a really cool image that's like firing fire out of his hands. And then the vision ends with Barnes spinning in the clouds and then coming out of the vision. So after this, the girlfriend gets Barnes to agree to go to visit with his old professor Quincy. That's what I heard in the movie, but I think it's spelled different online. Dr. Soames. Quincy Soames. Anyway, he gets told to go visit him so that he can have some help. Quincy agrees to observe him and like says, okay, if you're going to keep putting on this mask, you need to come here and I'll observe you every day and never put on the mask while I'm not in the room. Which will be a problem because he's going to leave Barnes in a bedroom alone with the mask. So that's going to cause a problem. At this point, I think the police have heard that Barnes has probably taken the mask, and they're saying maybe he's doing this to imitate Raiden, because I think they've finally clued into the fact that Michael Raiden is the guy's name, is that he's been killing some women around town. So they're gonna go look into that. We get another scene where Pam and Barnes talk, and I gotta say every scene with the female characters in this is just like, oh, I'm a lady and I don't understand what's going on. You need to be making more sense, after he said like a completely legible sentence. Which, yeah, I think this movie does struggle a bit from not being able to write women as actual characters. But, so yeah, they've gone to Quincy all the way, and they're going to go talk to him some more. Quincy, we get a little bit more lore about the mask. They're at this point where they're just admitting that, like, oh yeah, Barnes is on the verge of a break. Alan Barnes is on the verge of a breakdown, and it's at this point that they've left Barnes alone, sleeping in a room with the mask, and we get another thing where the narrator, which has been speaking in the voice of Michael, says, "Put the mask on now," and we get our final dream sequence. We meet again a guy who was in the last vision, who's just got like a hanging out eye. He's got like a scarred side of his face and his eyes hanging out. It's really quite spooky imagery. Alan sees his body getting burned on a thing, implying that he might be dooming himself. Michael gets, Alan gets pushed into a version of his girlfriend that's lying on this big stone tablet. He goes to kiss her, gets her sleeping form, and then she turns into a skeleton, wraps her arm around him, just to be super spooky. The dream sequences are all very well shot. I'll give them that. They're pretty iconic scenes that are deserve to be kind of paid attention to. They're pretty good. At this point, Alan runs off and slamming Quincy into the stairs to get him out of the way. He's immediately stolen the keys and is taking Quincy's car. At this point, Pam calls the police to give a description so that they can pull him over, because clearly he's being dangerous. Alan goes over to his secretary's house and offers to take her around, and she says that after a while that, like, oh, I need to do the ultimate thing a human can do and take another human life. So he eventually kills and strangles her, much like Michael had at the beginning of the movie, and also he receives a very similar three nail scratcher off his face. Don't know why it's only 3 nails, seeing as it's a person doing it. If it had been a person doing it, maybe they would have believed him in the initial bit. So he goes back to Quincy's house. Him and Quincy gets into a fight. He throws Quincy into the stairs and kills Quincy, just off screen. It's not very well portrayed, but I think it's good to imply that happened. Alan forces Pam to put on the mask. It doesn't seem to affect her, which is curious. And she's just like, no, I only see you. I don't see a hallucination. No idea why that is for sure. I don't know. Maybe something about her being a woman. I don't know. I don't know the reason for it. So at this point, Alan tries to start choking Pam, where he is accosted by the lieutenant, who shows up at the last minute to save the day. And then the movie ends by just showing Alan on the ground, separated from the mask, about to get arrested. And the final scene is the mask being portrayed in a museum. Not in any sort of locked case. And the guy's currently being tempted by it. And then that's the end of the movie. Well, what'd you think?
Continuation of this genre of horror film just like leads my belief into, like, if you find magical, mystical artifacts from ancient civilizations, you should probably just leave them the fuck alone and stop trying to like colonize and like museum everything for like personal gain.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's probably the part. The big message is don't take that ain't yours. Don't remove it from its original context.
Because I mean, like the Mummy was completely based around this idea. There's so many films that are like cursed relics being taken from tombs and
yeah. Everyone brings up that Jurassic Park is a big allegory for not wanting to bring back dinosaurs. No one brings up the Mummy as a allegory for don't fucking take stuff out of ancient tombs.
yeah.
Like, oh, anytime you take a thing out of an ancient tomb, it ends up being a bad deal. Like, even in the movie, like, you can say, oh, you want to be Indiana Jones, and everyone's like, oh, yeah, that's cool. Even though Indiana Jones is constantly getting into trouble. But you say that, like, oh, yeah, I want to clone dinosaurs. They're, like, looking at you like you're committing an act of hubris.
Who's I don't know. My whole opinion is like the film really only had the 3D working for it. If you take out the 3D portion of this film, you just kind of got a sub like plotted movie. Like,
yeah, the hallucination sequences kind of make the movie. I think they're okay, not in 3D. I think they're creative enough on their own, and because it's early, they're not like using 3D as obnoxiously most of the time.
and I mean the 3D wasn't all like it was good, but like once again, I watched this movie in 2D, and it's also a black and white film, and I notoriously dislike black and white films, so I don't know. I'm gonna say probably about 3 out of 10. Just generally in plot line, but I think that the 3D in itself probably brings it up to a 4 to maybe even a 5.
Yeah. I'm giving it a 7 for being of the time. If this movie were made like 10 years later, it'd be like a 4. Like, I think this, like, as an exercise of the ability things they had going for them at the time. Okay, 7, maybe. Really strong 6 if you want to be mean. But yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is gonna be our shortest like finale episode, I think. Although part of that is because all our finale episodes are like on long movies.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, this was only 83 minutes, and I think it was cut down.
Yeah, you saw a slightly shorter version, I think.
Like
so.
96 minutes or something.
Yeah, this was I think my cut was an hour and 32.
Yeah, mine was an hour and 12.
It might have actually been an hour. No, it was an hour 22. I suppose we just talk about the podcast for a minute here, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. What did you think of this season? Like the last 25 episodes? I know it's hard to remember them because we've slowed down our output a good bit.
Slowed down our output, and it's been like really hit or miss on whether or not we're recording. I think we were trying for an episode every 2 weeks, and then some of them got pushed back because of side projects and like personal reasons and stuff like that. But
I had a job change in the last year, which is a bit more demanding of me. Let's see, what did we start this season on? Oh, the first one we did was the Fantastic Four movie, like that '90s one.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, we had a few big hit, like I think really good episodes early on. It was Fantastic Four, then we did Phase 4, and then we did the original Fast and the Furious, Power Rangers, Big Wednesday. Yeah, lots of neat movies. Lots of stuff that I kind of just wanted to do because it sounded cool. And then The Happening, for whatever reason. Which was one of your picks.
Yes.
But yeah, I think in a lot of ways it feels shorter than other seasons, but we didn't have like a overarching thing we were doing this time. We just kind of came into season 4, wanted to do more horror movies, which I feel like we did a few. I don't know, what do you think?
of the season. I kind of like the idea of like moving away from themes and just generally kind of doing films, genres. Once again, there was a like really super period where we did like 3 science fiction films back to back, and like breaking it up with the fantasy film was just generally really good, and then following it up with like a horror film was also very good. You can only do so much science fiction before you start to lose basis of reality for a while. So it's one of the reasons why like our other show is called poly sci-fi, but I've stated before that I don't want to stick generally to the sci-fi genre because then it just becomes too constructed, I guess it would be the word that I'm looking for. Like, so just branching out and being able to do other things is...
I think in the next episode of the poly sci-fi is about like Rasputin and like how like he gets portrayed in pop culture, which not really, like, obviously not a scientific topic or a science fiction topic, but I think that's going to be a little bit more real sci-fi, or like real more history podcast, more history thing. There's some episodes of that I might just be like pure real world stuff too. I kind of want to do a thing on like video, like I have like a video game related episode I want to do, and like about like microtransactions and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's part of that. I think I don't know, we'll probably just, when we end up doing some more episodes of this, which they're gonna, I think we'll maybe do like probably at least 2 more poly sci-fi before we come back to this.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think we're going to be splitting our time fairly thoroughly between both shows, depending on how we want to go about this and other ideas. We might end up sticking to more, maybe like what we'll call season 5. Maybe that's just like we do a lot more just strict Canadian horror movies, a lot more like more independent stuff. I've been thinking about maybe doing some, I need to watch a few of these, but maybe just doing some films that have been like financed on like Kickstarter or something. It was like an independent films.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
Yeah.
Try and go back to like low budgets and moderate roots.
Yeah, get back to that. And
like I think when we started this film, the podcast, our first film was Velocipaster, which I'm like 95% certain that was I guess I should say like 75% certain that was a Kickstarter film. So
yeah, I think we might go more on that. I don't know. I could, if I wanted to be hard, like do a hard thing, I'd say like maybe we do like a budget cap on the films, do a lot more cult stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I got a few films I want to watch.
I'd also really
idea of, but
like to explore more Canadian films, because I feel like they're rather really good or really, really not good, and I haven't quite like been able to make up my mind on where I fall in terms of like whether or not I enjoy Canadian films or not.
Yeah, Canadian, like I think that may be a bit a thing we do. I think I'll maybe grab a few, like I mentioned in this episode, the like tax shelter era of Canadian cinema. I think I'll maybe pick like, I'll go a little further into my Canadian horror book I was talking about earlier. It Came From Within, and like pick out a few movies from that era and get some of that.
Yeah.
I have an inkling to do Ilsa She-Wolf of the SS at some point.
There was an episode of like How I Met Your Mother, which there was a running joke because one of the main characters was Canadian, that like like Canadian time moves slower than like the rest of the world time. So like our 1970s was like the US equivalent of like the 1990s, or that like we just don't like keep up with the like world trends. So like
It's just one of those difficult things because anytime you do a Canadian film, you're trying to compete with American stuff, and you need to like, as much as we don't like to admit it, that you need to like come up with some sort of economic edge the Canadian films have, or Canadian films, and frankly TV too. The Canadian film and TV has that American films don't necessarily have. I know that's kind of a. I did once toy with the idea of doing a podcast based on Canadian cartoons, which I don't know, maybe one day, but because there's certain like the censorship standards between Canada and the U.S. are different, so you can do stuff on Canadian cartoons that like children's cartoons that you can't do in the United States.
also I guess generally speaking that like my idea of what like Canadian cartoons is very misconstrued because I grew up in Canada. So like Teletoon and like YTV were like really big when I was growing up, and like I don't know how much of our like Canadian um cartoons or cartoons that I seen as a kid are actually Canadian compared to what was being seen on the world stage, I guess.
Like they usually keep a few around,
Hmm.
and like
Like
anytime in
Mr.
America,
Dress Up
yeah, and there's a lot of like
is
co-productions.
Canadian.
I can name a couple of good few. Like I've, and some of them are really good. Like a really kind of standout one is Cyber Six, which is actually kind of like a Canadian Japanese or Canadian Japanese co-production based on like an Argentinian comic, which is kind of
Mhm.
which is really good.
Which is kind of funny because like I grew up a fairly like on the lower end of like the like poverty spectrum. So like I remember having three channels on a television where the only three channels we got were like CBC, Global, and there was a third one, and I can't quite think of the channel name. And so when I got home from school as a kid, there was like a whole bunch of like CBC programs that I grew up on that like wouldn't be even like recognizable at this point in time. So
I had more channels than that, but my parents were very. They wouldn't buy like. They would limit how much like stuff they would buy just for us. Like we got YTV and Teletoon, but
mhm.
those because they were like the cheap stations you could get. Like I never got like a Cartoon Network or anything.
Yeah, I think they were. Yeah, that's like basic cable level of like
Yeah,
television programming when you got like 30 channels,
yeah.
and YTV and Teletoon were one of them, or at least.
You get like 10
So,
channels that they're the same channel and just different time zones. Like you get the CTV for 5 different cities, so you can catch stuff at different times.
oh, that was the other one. It was CBC, CTV, and
Yeah,
Global
yeah, those are
were the three
yeah.
channels we had growing up.
But yeah, I think that's sort of where we're at with this. Yeah, this is a bit more of a low end energy finale than I maybe thought. I wanted to talk, kind of just like gush a little bit about like Canadian film history because it was sort of important. And yeah,
It is late.
yeah, we got started late today too. That's another part of the problem. But yeah, we'll probably do like I kind of want to do a live stream before this ends up going up. That'll maybe make up for a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we'll figure something out. I'll get editing this over the weekend. Thanks everyone for listening. Those of you that do. This is obviously more of a
Yeah, I
hobby.
think I logged in last time, and I think our Libsyn was up to about 2,700 downloads. I don't know if that's good or not. And then we've been doing like pretty decent numbers on YouTube. I don't know how decently our retention rate is, but
Gotten a few. I was trying something different with the titles too, which I don't know that really accomplished
yeah.
much. But one of the big weird ones was I guess we got a little bit of Rick and Morty algorithm from that big Wednesday review, which was kind of fun.
Mm-hmm.
Jan Michael Vincent. Anyway, thanks for watching, listening. Thanks everyone for like the support. Thanks to Victoria Koops for the logo. Because we're just gonna thank everybody. Thanks Victoria Koops for the logo. And thank you, Audra Balian, for the YouTube artwork. I don't want to thank our free music thing where I get the theme song from. Thanks everyone for listening. I guess y'all can go home. I'm gonna shut down the recording.
Yeah. And